That's great. So I think one thing you mentioned there as well, and I think it came with about platforms, and then I think it came up with Kimberly as well about multiple platforms. What, there are a lot of multiple platforms out there, and I think recently people have been exposed to more. What are some of the challenges though, as far as managing the multiple platforms, multiple kind of ways of dealing with information and specs, and are they, does the information translate and kind of, talk to one another?
Well, the platforms that are out there are varied, and there's no, I'll say, Amazon for building material platforms. And that right there is kind of the issue. People are Googling, Google's the world. So everybody's Googling, and then you get a laundry list of different materials that quote unquote are under the same material, but when you look at them, they're not. So you have to try to drill down to get that information. That drilling down process can take some time. And then once you drill down, you may have multiple products that then you have to evaluate to make sure they fit your situation. So there's no one platform currently that gives you that availability. It's a multiple platforms of different applications, I'll say, that are available for you to do the research. And then you have to take that information and whittle it down to create essentially your own platform, so that you can work within that sphere of information that you're trying to achieve at the end of the day. It's still very difficult to whittle it down because there's so much information out there on the web. And there's no direct correlation. So everybody's not testing everything to the same standards. We all know ASTM, but there could be multiple ASTM tests. They're testing various materials. So even to that degree, you could be evaluating materials, not even having the same ASTM test. And that way you can't even evaluate it from that point of view. So uniformity would be great. And that would give the design team a much easier avenue to pursue to evaluate as a starting point materials.
Yeah, it seems what I think is interesting for something that's so physical. We're talking about, we started with Kimberly's comments about really, being, driven by this kind of tactility and interest in materials. And now we start talking about data and data management and how difficult it can quickly become to, Jonah, when you were talking about this kind of greatest hits idea of materials, like you kind of assemble a palette, and that's one of the things that you bring to the table as an experienced architect. But I've also been amazed by how difficult it is sometimes even to manage that as an organization, like to track exactly what product was selected and which one got substituted. So even if you're looking at a photograph of a project that your own office did, like sometimes it's a research project to find out what that material finally ended up being. And so I think if anything, that's a limitation of our current information management systems that we're dealing with.
And we find at times that, at the end of a project, we're putting together manuals for our clients about, the requirements of, okay, that certain, material that's over there can only be cleaned with X, Y, and Z, or, this, and all of that information, it's a crazy amount of stuff that needs to be put together and compiled for a client, and it almost becomes overwhelming for them. And then if there's any kind of change that happens throughout the process, as going back and trying to fix that again, and then you end up realizing, wait, am I speccing a product that we didn't like last time? And all of a sudden it's working, we're doing it again, but to our detriment. So, you always have to kind of try and go back and reconcile, but it's a lot of data.
Nick, that is the biggest problem in the industry right now is the data management. We work for multiple clients, and I can't tell you how many times we're in a meeting, they're like, we'd like to use what's on that job. I'm like, well, this is what was spec, but what was used, what was physically installed. And 2 weeks later, they get back to me, they had to go, look, and they had to do all this research to find out what's actually installed in relationship if there was a substitution. So right now, currently, that would be one of the greatest tools, is a data management system, in order so that you could warehouse all this data so that you can recall it. And we have various systems that we have in place that we internally have. But across board architecture, that would be something that would be.
Yeah, and I think as we, one thing that we're a little remiss not to discuss is the way everything's being transformed by, by increased interest in sustainability and where our materials are coming from. We mentioned carbon footprint, all of these things. So tracking kind of cradle to grave or cradle to cradle, I mean, is a challenge, but especially if we can't even figure out kind of cradle of design process to grave of the actual building, like how big of a challenge is this across our industry? It's amazing. It's getting to be 7:05 just before, and I want to make sure that we do have time for the showcase. Maybe if people have some closing remarks or things that they would just, ideas that came up, I'd like to just open the floor for that.
I guess a closing remark of mine would be that at the end of the day, you can Google as much as you want. You can read the paperwork, the spec sheet, all that stuff. At the end of the day, people want to talk to someone, right? You want to talk to a rep. You want to talk to a rep that you trust as well, right? Not just someone trying to sell product to you. And it becomes really important, those relationships that you build, because you need to trust them. And you need to feel like you've got an advocate at the brand looking out not just for their bottom line to sell you the product, but for all of the wants and needs that you and your client have come to the table with.
Great. Well, if there are no other comments, I think I'm really excited to hear from ACE-Lab and see, and we have Art on here just turned on his cameras, and there's Dries. So I'm really excited to, we're going to actually have a kind of product demo here, which hopefully will offer some solutions, or at least approaches to solutions to a lot of the challenges we've discussed tonight. So.
Great. Thanks so much, Nick. Really, really excited to be here. I also want to just start by thanking all the attendees who are with us at this time in the evening. We'll make sure that it's worth your while. So I'd love to just start with an introduction about Dries and I and ACE-Lab, and then hand it over to Dries, where he'll be able to show us some of the tools that we've been building at ACE-Lab. ACE-Lab really started with our experiences as young architects and all the frustrations we felt on the business side of the industry. So I graduated from Pratt in the city, and then I worked at Weissman Ferry as a junior architect. Dries worked and went to school in Belgium. And while we were in architecture school, we of course were working on these radical ideas with a lot of energy, as we all do. But as soon as we started to practice architecture, we started to realize that being an architect can sometimes mean writing Word documents for 4 hours a day. So a lot of our time was actually being spent on administrative work. And a big chunk of that was, in fact, the product sourcing and the spec writing piece. So just to be able to find the right window for this product, as an architect, I would have to find all of these attributes for a few options to be able to make an informed decision. And with all the info channels out there, as an architect, I would have to Google windows, find 5 to 8 manufacturers, spend 50 to 100 clicks on each of their websites, go to trade shows, speak to sales reps, nonstop phone calls and emails. And even after all of that, I may not have all the information that I need to understand to be able to use that product in the project. And we really just felt a need in the industry for 2 things. First, transparent interactions with manufacturers to understand their products, their craft, and their story. Secondly, comprehensive data for these products that we can actually trust. And that's where ACE-Lab was born, as an information marketplace to connect architects and manufacturers. So now I'll just show you guys some of our USPs of the things that we've tried to address from the psyche of practicing architects. It all started with doing our homework and spending a lot of time with spec writers to understand, organize, and create these database structures for building products. And the goal here was to structure the data in a comprehensive way. That enables us with a detailed product library, where it looks and feels like an Amazon, where you have filter options. You can essentially save the products to something like a shopping cart, third-party certifications, and all the downloads available on one page. Next, we also recognize that being able to design the product is really important. And a lot of my time as a junior architect was actually spent to create these Excel sheets like this with 3 options from the short listing of building products, and to be able to have the same data items for all of them. Since we work with highly quality, standardized, and structured data, we're able to do this automatically on AceLab. And then lastly, we as architects are also just bombarded with emails and phone calls from sales reps and manufacturers, even at times when it may not be the right time in a project. So in this case, you're able to request things like lead times, price codes, and additional information from manufacturers and their sales rep, and then share all of the same information with all the team members on a project through one centralized platform. Lastly, due to the structured nature of the data and the fact that we allow architects to save all of their choices on the platform, it also enables us to automate a draft of the spec sheet. So Leila, who is a principal at AIA Architects, she found value in AceLab for her teams at the office to be able to search, compare, select, and specify building products in a few seconds. The gap that we're trying to fill here is what we felt as practicing architects, where we're able to provide a vast and detailed product database along with project and data management solutions. And right now we're already in the process of onboarding manufacturers, and we onboard more every day. So with this event, we are offering a free registration to all the attendees. So you can log on now to acelabusa.com. I'm also happy to just copy paste the link in the chat just in a minute. And we'd also just love to learn from your feedback. Right now we're grad students at Harvard and MIT, and every single time we speak to architects, we learn of more of the pain points that need to be solved on the business side of architecture, especially in the domains of product sourcing and spec writing.